This is the lecture for Wednesday, the 28th of October in Ancient and Medieval History. Please have your notepacks open to Section 2, From Culture to Civilization. E, Civilization. 5, Complex Institutions. A, Family. A1, Extended Family, which is where we've been. I shouldn't be hearing voices. Okay. So, where we were yesterday was talking about extended families. Now, extended families are much more stable and much more common than either broken homes or nuclear families. In part because any family with children has 3 full-time jobs that need doing. The first is breadwinner to bring in the money. The second is homemaker to make the house livable, which is a full-time job before modern electronics. The third is child rearer or child raiser. And in a nuclear family, you've only got 2 adults to do those things. In a broken home, you've got 1. So the extended family is durable because you've got so many adults to help share the burden. The extended family gives you, as a child, the option of learning from people with a wide variety of skills who live in your house and can help you out. The extended family isn't one paycheck away from disaster because there are several wage earners contributing to the household's expenses. On the other hand, you don't have your own home if you're a young adult. You don't have the authority that you would have over your children if you had your own home because your mother-in-law and aunts and uncles and everyone else is still there, and everyone gets involved in everyone's business. You don't have privacy. And very often you don't have your own money, at least not a lot of it, because people contribute to the family funds, and the family funds are spent at the discretion of the patriarch or the matriarch. So, the extended family has some real strengths, and it is the norm for civilized people around the world throughout human history. Like monarchy, it is the normal way that people organize themselves if you look at what is most common around the world and throughout our history. It was the normal way within the United States until we got rich after World War II. After World War II, things change, and there is a different family that becomes dominant, and that's the nuclear family. Young adults who had grown up during the Depression and who had fought World War II suddenly were back, and they had money. They had a job. They had a career that could support their own family in their own house. So extended families within the United States tended to break up into a bunch of nuclear families. Grandparents have their own place. Parents have their place with their kids. Aunts and uncles have their own places with their kids. And cousins see less of one another except at family gatherings. And now you have the advantages of privacy, of autonomy. You can choose your own way of life. You can choose the rules that you're going to raise your kids with. You've got space to spread out in. But there's one breadwinner, maybe 2 if both parents work. And there's one homemaker, maybe 2 if they share the burdens. That wasn't usually the case. And if there are children, you've got child rearer. And usually the mother is there all the time as a housewife, but the father is the heavy. Wait till your father gets home was the refrain that a lot of families had during this period. Because the father would come home from a long day of work, and the kids, who mom didn't discipline as much, were going to face dad's wrath. So people did their best to function in this new nuclear environment. And the nuclear family becomes the norm, and suddenly our houses change. Instead of building these big pre-war structures, We build sort of rabbit hutch homes that you see with ranch homes and ranchettes and ranchers, and jolly ranchers, and all the other kinds of real estate that exist all around here. Single family homes with their own yards. And that's the norm now, or that at least was the norm through the late 40s, 1950s, 1960s, into the 70s and 80s. But then those stresses, as well as other things, begin to change. First of all, the Arabs embargo our oil, and suddenly the price of everything goes up. This happens in the early 1970s. At the same time, you have women in the household who are claiming that it's their right to go out and join the workforce because of the women's liberation movement. And suddenly, it becomes necessary for women to go out if you're going to maintain the same living standard. If your income is constant, if your expenses continue to go up because of the oil embargo, you either need to reduce your expenses, and that means reduce your living standard, or you need to get more money, which often meant the wife takes a part-time job or even a full-time job. Is that a hand?
No.
Okay. So, the nuclear family begins to come under stress. But understand that the nuclear family, like suburbs, is a product of great wealth and great peace and great prosperity. Only societies that are extraordinarily wealthy have suburbs, and only societies that are extraordinarily wealthy and powerful have nuclear families become the norm. But the nuclear family's inherent instability comes out under the strains that I've just described. And you end up with single-parent households or broken homes. Use whatever term you like. But the reality is that's what I grew up in. That's what a lot of you were growing up in. And there's good and there's bad. On the one hand, you don't grow up with squabbling parents. Not all marriages work. Not all relationships work. And if you don't get along with your spouse and you're constantly fighting around the kids, there are problems that are going to come. Now, some people fight well, and they end up with decisive victories and defeats, but both sides can survive. And I'm not saying that every household that has fighting is bad. It's certainly not. Fighting is a normal thing that human beings do because we're quarrelsome, aggressive creatures. But there's fighting, which happens sometimes, and the consequences are not that bad. And then there's fighting, that's what people do. That's all that people do. The family is nothing but fight and fight and fight and fight and fight. Fight, 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 fight. The mommy and daddy show. It's bad. And it's blighted and it's poisonous. In a case like that, is it better to divorce or not? That's up to the couple. But what you end up with in a single family home is you don't have that. At least you shouldn't, because you have a single parent who is making the decisions. That's the upside. I'm going to finish and I'll take your comment. The downside is obvious. If a nuclear family had stresses because there are 3 full-time jobs and only 2 parents, now you've got one parent trying to do it all. Whee! Da, 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 da. I'm juggling with an uncooked egg, live chicken, and an active chainsaw. Think about that. That's not a happy thing to do. Juggling an uncooked egg, a live chicken, and a chainsaw is a recipe for lots of blood and death. Single mom or single dad has to deal with all 3 jobs. And it's impossible. So they do the best they can, hopefully, by their kids, but it's not an ideal situation. Neither was a nuclear family. There is no such thing as an ideal family. There is no such thing as a perfect childhood. I'll save you thousands of dollars of therapy in your adult lives by saying this to you, if you really believe it. Everyone has problems. Everyone has difficulties that they need to overcome. You think because somebody's wealthy they don't have problems? Forget about it. One of the illusions that poor people have is that more money will make you happier and more comfortable. More money can help, but more money cannot make you happier, and it cannot make you more comfortable when it comes to the depressions and the existential problems of life and death. Money is not the answer. Helps, but it's not the answer. The truth is, and I'll call on her and then I'll call on you, you never know what another person's going through. After World War II, my mother-in-law, as a young mother, was going into a doctor's office because she was going to have her first child. And she was always harried. She was a Navy wife. There was always this beautiful woman that happened to be there taking appointments at about the same time. And she was immaculately dressed. Her hair perfect, her makeup in order. Absolutely. And my mother-in-law had a flash of envy, saying, boy, I wish I had it like her, instead of just living in a chaos zone, which is what she felt like she was living. She later found out that that woman had terminal cancer. You never know. You never know what somebody else is dealing with. They may look perfect on the outside and be falling apart inside. You never know. So a little humility goes a long way. But there's no such thing as a perfect childhood. We all have to overcome the scars of our upbringing. That's normal. Yes?
The mentioning of fighting, the reason my parents got divorced is because of a lot of different fighting that happened over the 13 times that we did move. We were constantly moving to see if we can make my dad happy in 30 different places. Mm-hmm. And in the end, that didn't end up happening. And my mom took me, my little sister, my little brother, and we left. We left, and we didn't talk to him again for like 2 months after that because he would not stop yelling at her and freaking out on her every single time he could get in contact with her. So about 6 months later, she filed an official divorce, and then we proceeded to find her own house to live in. My mom later on worked really hard. She studied for 2 weeks straight to make sure she could get her insurance license, which she is now a supervisor for her company, which is a really big thing for her because she's only been doing it for about a year and a half. Mm-hmm. And she does get paid on commission. She does not get an hourly pay. However, there's a chance she might start getting an hourly pay really soon, which would be really good for her. But she's trying to take care of 3 children, a very large house, a bunch of pets, everything by herself, and my big sister, who has a brand new baby at this time. However, because a lot of my grandparents live over here, they're here to help her. And with my mom's boyfriend as well, he's always there to help. Like if she needs extra money or if she needs him to go grocery shopping or pick us up from school, he's always there to help her out, which is really good for her too because after being inside of such a toxic relationship for so many years, she actually had somebody who was willing to help her take care of everything, and it got a lot better for her.
Good. By the way, just be careful. Say what you want to say in public. I'm okay with everything you said. I just want to make sure that you don't regret anything. Not that I think you have anything to regret from what you just said. I'm glad things are working out. Excuse me?
What?
Yeah. I hear noise.
No.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Fine. I can do that because I went to college to know how to do in a sort of a scant way. So before I call on you, there's one other aspect of the 2-parent versus 1-parent home. I didn't know my half-sister or half-brother until I was an adult. And when I got to know them, and they grew up at the other end of the country, we were talking about things like this. And I said, well, yeah, there are special problems that you have when you grow up when your dad's not around. And she said, yes, but understand this. My sister Jennifer said this. We had to grow up with him and with my mother. And that wasn't a pleasure cruise either. And what that means is that any set of parents is going to have problems. Whether they're together or not. There's no such thing as a perfect childhood. There are such things as dysfunctional families and functional families. That's a different thing. Yes.
Okay, so when I was little, I lived with my mom, and my grandmother, and also me, and for a while I had to deal with a bit of that fighting because there was a lot of problems because everyone in my family knew from the beginning when my mom gave birth to me that she couldn't take care of me because she had an issue, and so eventually it kind of was also stressing me out because I had spent so much time with my mom and I'd been with her the most that I really start to view my other family as like bad people. Eventually I got over that and now my grandmother's the one who's raising me alone with my dad helping pay child support and we have the rest of my family in Idaho to help. Mm-hmm. And the way she's been able to juggle the 3 things is that she has a job that allows her to stay at home for like typing.
These days that's helpful.
Yeah, and that's part. and that's been able to help us without having to schedule in something else for like when I need to go and do my own things. And also I help what I can with doing the housework. And honestly, she also had to help me a lot when it came to the first year when I had to spend without my mom. But I'd say she's been doing a good job of being able to juggle everything.
We do what we can.
Yeah.
And nobody does it perfectly. Modern families are complicated. By the way, I'm not going to pretend that it's equivalent. I think that unless it's completely dysfunctional, and sometimes it is, but I think that there are intrinsic benefits to having both parents in your lives as you grow up. I really do, if that's possible. If it's possible to have mom and dad and grandparents, you're going to get certain things. And with an absent parent, especially a parent that you don't know, there are going to be things about yourself that you won't know unless or until you meet them. You may not be able to meet them or encounter them until you're an adult. But one of the things that we use to figure out the world is the parents that we have in the family we grow up with. Family teaches the basic lessons of life. Without learning those things from the family, you could end up learning them in schools or in prison, or you could end up never learning them and spending a lot of time in prison. Now, what do families do? Bless you. Families tell you how to tie your shoes and how to button your shirt and how to not go out with your fly-on zips. Families tell you how to eat at the dinner table, not grabbing everything and blah, 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 but to eat with manners, to say please, to say thank you, to be polite, to be patient, to share sometimes, and to say this is mine at other times. Families teach you the basic lessons of right and wrong, good and evil. They teach you that some things will get you rewards and other things will get you punished. You need to learn these things because children are not fit to survive on their own. Now, 500 years ago, people your age, 1,000 years ago, people your age, were entering adulthood. And I don't mean like teenagers at some point. I mean, you are in adulthood now. 1,000 years ago, in the Middle Ages, all of you would be working as adults. Many of you would have children of your own. You would be adults. But life was much simpler then. We've now infantilized young adults to such an extent that it used to be that people between 18 and 23 would get out into the world and go live. Now we have a healthcare system that allows people until they're age 26 to stay on their parents' insurance. It's much more normal for people to go to college and then come back home and live in their parents' basement. For how long? Who knows? That's unusual. That's maybe unnatural. But these are, we're like delaying real adulthood more and more and more and more and more. This is something you'll see as you get a little older. You'll have friends who are older than you. And some of them will go to college and they'll change a bit. And some of them will go into the military and they'll change a lot. And what I've observed in my own life and from my students over the years is the students who go into the service grow up. They're adults by the time they're 20. They may still have young adult tendencies. They may still have wild parties, drink a lot, sleep with various people. Yeah, sure. But they can discipline and control themselves in a way that a lot of the college kids don't learn, which is weird. So families are the first lesson teachers about life. If you don't learn from your family how to behave, how to control yourself, you might learn in church. If you go to church, you might get a sense that God doesn't want you to be a selfish, violent idiot. But if you don't learn from your family or church, you might learn in school. Because in school, right now, you're doing one of the basic keys to success in life. You are sitting quietly, listening, or at least appearing to listen. You are appearing to listen, you are appearing productive, and you're controlling yourself. You're controlling the impulse to go, I want to play ball now! I want to do other things now. You're controlling all of that. Self-discipline is key. So in school, a lot of people get, in church, a lot of people get, from family, most people get these basic lessons. But if you don't get them, you're going to get them in prison. Because the society that we live in will not allow rampant criminal behavior. Despite 2020, it will not last. We will not permit rampant anarchic criminal behavior, period. And that means if you don't learn how to control yourself, we will control you. That's the basic lesson of maturity. To the extent you're able to control yourself, your parents will give you freedom. Your school and teachers will give you freedom. You will have freedom in the world. But if you can't control yourself, if you're a constant problem, if you're a constant irritant, if you're constantly making difficulties for the people around you, getting in their face, messing with them, teasing them, stealing from them, violating them, we will control you. We will put you in jail. We will punish you. And maybe you will learn the lesson. Maybe you won't. Some people never learn. So family has a very important role. It is the front line. It's the most basic institution. And there's something that you need to understand about dictatorships. Every time you have a tyrant or a dictatorship, they always want to destroy the family. Because the family teaches right and wrong. And what the tyrant wants is they want to be the measure of right and wrong. You agree with me, you're right. You disagree with me, you're wrong. And families can get in the way of that. So the communists, the Nazis, the fascists, the phalangists, anarcho-syndicalists, and others who want to seize total power and change society always try to destroy the family unit and de-emphasize. Have any of you ever heard the name of Elian Gonzalez? Okay, you're young. In the late 90s, Elian Gonzalez and his mother and father lived in Cuba, little Cuban boy. Elian's mother and father got divorced, and Elian's mother built a raft and managed to get that raft out into the jet stream, the Gulf Stream, and cross the Florida Strait. Elian's mother died in the crossing, but he survived, and he was sent to live with his uncle, an auto dealer in Miami. So, Elian's in this country, and then the Cuban communists start saying, his father wants him back. His father wants him back. And a bunch of Americans who should have known better say, you know, fathers have rights too, because under modern American divorce laws, they don't have many rights, not compared to the mother, not usually. So a lot of men's rights activists, yeah, fathers have rights too. Get the kid back. Guys, if you send that kid back to Cuba, he's not going to be raised by his dad. He's going to be raised by the Communist Party, which raises everyone in Cuba. They control your food, your housing, the jobs your parents do, your education, your sports. They get into your head. The commissars make sure that you're not guilty of thought crime. I know. I have relatives murdered by these people. So the Clinton administration, in its wisdom, broke into Elian's uncle's home in the middle of the night with machine guns drawn, submachine guns, and they took this kid out, 6, 7 years old, at gunpoint, and put him back on the boat to Cuba with diplomats. And since then, he became a poster boy for Cuban communism. There are some societies where families don't raise the children, where the state raises the children. Usually they are totalitarian police states. Cuba is one of them. Was and is. And so understand the role of the family and how it relates to tyranny. Yes?
You already said it. I knew the story and I was going to add something onto it, but you went over it.
Okay. You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Glad you know the story. It's a good story. It's worth knowing.
I learned it in 7th grade.
I just remembered about the story.
Okay.
Also.
So, that's family. Second institution, faith. Let's go through variant levels of faith. We start out with animism, and this is in your notes. Animism is the belief that everything has a soul. Everything is alive. Everything can be spoken to and listened to. Everything has a soul. Animism is the belief that everything is animated. The word animus is the word for soul. So, a tree has a soul, a waterfall has a soul, a rock has a soul, a mountain has a soul. Animism is probably the most primitive form of faith. I'm not saying worst, I'm saying most primitive. Paleolithic hunter-gatherers appreciate the power of different places, what we would call the genius loci, the spirit of the place. So, when you eat, you sacrifice a little of your food, you pour out a little of your drink for the gods of the place. Now, in the modern world, there is one very powerful and widespread animistic belief. It is Shinto from Japan. The Shinto beliefs of Japan are interesting, and because they work in a modern society, they're worth studying. If you ever want to read some interesting myths, read the Kojiki, which we've had some experience with. Itsunami, Itsunagi, peaches, all that stuff. So, the Japanese believe that they live in the land of the living and awake gods. The Japanese believe that through Shinto they can talk not only to their ancestors, but to the spirits of the wind and the waves, the mountains and the forests, the farmlands, and the home. One of the things that Shinto does is, the big volcano near Tokyo is called Mount Fuji in English, but it's called Fujisan or Fujiyama-san in Japanese. San is the honorific for a man or a woman. It means the honorable. So Fujisan is not just the mountain. Fujisan is the person that's the mountain. The kami, K-A-M-I, the soul of the mountain. And through Shinto ritual, you can interact with it. You can learn from it. You can learn from the spirits of wind and wave. But there's something else about the Japanese Shinto belief system. The objects of man also have souls. These keys each have a soul, having to do with what locks they open and what experiences they've had opening locks. Your car would have a soul. When the Japanese built battleships back in the day, those battleships had a strong soul. And they had a presence in the Shinto belief system. So this is why if you do Gundam anime, the suit has a personality. It's not just the person that gets into the suit driving it around. The suit is a being that the rider must join with, fuse with. And this comes from Japanese Shinto belief in a moment. The heart of Japanese belief is Amaterasu Omikami, goddess of the sun, and her lineal descendant, the Emperor Naruhito, who is a living god among men. Now, after World War II, the Japanese government and the Emperor Hirohito said, I'm not a god, just to please the Americans. But most Japanese, or a significant number of Japanese, still believe the living emperor is a god, and that their land is specially blessed. It is the land of the awakened kami. It's the land of Shinto. So animism is the belief that everything has a soul.
When you said the thing about mountains, like, I didn't know I had that, but I knew that they always did that. Because when I lived in Korea, we did a lot of hiking, and a lot of the mountains had, like, Namsan as a mountain we like to hike at. And I didn't know why. I was just like, oh, it's just, like, part of the name.
There's some crossover between Japan and Korea. Even though the Koreans and Japanese really don't like one another at all, there is some cultural crossover there. Excellent. I didn't know that. I didn't know the Koreans did that. That's cool. Second form of religion. Oh, yes, Zoe.
The animism thing was like on the keys and the other stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the series I watched, it's also based on a video game. Some of the creatures actually are like based off of keys or ice cream or garbage or
because
a lamp.
They believe that everything has a spirit. The question is the spirit fully awake or is it partially asleep? Is it dormant and going to wake up again? But it's what's different between the, say, Celtic Druidism, which a lot of modern Wiccans try to act like they understand, even though they really don't in many cases, is the Druids and the Celtic tradition, the Western tradition of animism, does not include the works of man. For the most part, it includes simply natural things. But Japanese definitely does. Did I miss any hands? Were there any other? Okay. Second variant of religion. What?
Ari.
It's
Oh, please, no. Go ahead. Thank you.
I was watching this Solve Mysteries on Netflix.
Yep.
And, there was an episode on the Japanese tsunami.
Japanese what?
The tsunami in...
Oh, yes, the Fukushima event?
Huh?
The Fukushima event, the one that damaged the nuclear power plant? Or just tsunamis in general?
No, just the one that happened.
Okay.
And you mentioned that they getting the spirits of their loved ones and stuff. And after that event, there was like paranormal activity, reporting some of their dead loved ones, talk to them, and I don't know. It was really interesting.
It is, and it doesn't. That's an interesting event for a bunch of reasons. First off, if you ever look at the video, and it's available online, it's horrific. the sea comes on the land, but it's not this giant wave like you see in movies. It's just a wave, and it goes quarter mile inland, half mile inland, and sweeps everything out. Sometimes buildings, but every car, every person, just like God scouring the land clean. One of the places that it hit was the Fukushima power plant, nuclear power plant. And the Japanese government bobbled it. They didn't call in American help soon enough. They thought that they would handle it themselves out of pride. And as a result, to this day, we have hardcore radioactive leakage from the remains of that power plant into the Pacific Ocean. And that's been for the last 9 years. That's pretty bad. When you have an incident like that, a traumatic incident like that, yeah, those people who are sensitive to psychic impressions, they feel it. And in Japanese, the Shinto explains all of that. So it's all very orderly and organized. Yes.
So
Thank
like, so when a natural disaster happens, like the military of America will try to do something about it, like they'll send people and stuff. It made me think like my dad's in the Navy, like he's retired from the Navy now, but like he told me about sometimes like they'd be like, oh, there's a call, like something bad happened, and they'd like try to send people over, but then they'd be like, no, we don't want your help. And they'd be like, oh, no, nothing bad happened, like with the coronavirus in China. Like they're like, oh, it wasn't very bad. Then all of a sudden, you hear about all these deaths.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to admit that they're weak when they are.
Exactly. Look, if you send an American carrier task force to help out, like we did after tsunamis in Sumatra about 10 years ago, you have a power plant that can power a city. You've got hospital care that's among the best in the world. You've got food and medical assistance. You've got people that can come in and rebuild your infrastructure. The U.S. military saves lives and saves communities. But yeah, if you're dealing with a communist government like in China, oh, they don't want to admit anything. In fact, I think, well, I'm not going to go into detail about why I think the communists let the coronavirus run wild. I think it was on purpose. But, yeah, no. And even when we come in, I had some former students who worked in Haiti after some major earthquakes there. And Haiti is a Caribbean island dominated by former slaves. And it's a chaotical place. And the Haitians basically sat back and let the Americans do everything. They did not help in rebuilding their own area. That's strange. Normally, if you have damage, you help fix it. Not so. They waited for us to do it all for them. And that's just interesting. Anyway, if I see no other hands, okay. Polytheism is not the belief that parrots are deities. It's my little joke. Polly, what a cracker. Polytheism is the belief in many gods. Polytheos. Poly, many, theos, God. Polytheism is typified by the Greek and Norse pantheons. So you've got Zeus, or Jupiter. You've got Hera, or Juno. You've got Aphrodite, or Venus. You've got Hephaestus, or Vulcan. You've got Ares, or Mars. Who's the messenger of the god? Hermes, or Mercury. Now, I gave you the Greek and Roman names. Zeus likes the human women. Hera doesn't like the fact that her husband likes the human women. Aphrodite, goddess of love. She likes everyone. Ares, god of war. He doesn't.
Well, he likes Aphrodite, and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
She's his wife.
Yeah.
But, like, that's kind of it.
Hephaestus, or Vulcan, he makes things. He's the craftsman. But these are people like gods. The difference between animism and polytheism is this difference. In animism, you're dealing with genuinely alien intelligences. Trees, rocks, places, waterfalls. In the case of battleships, if they're in Japan. In the case of polytheism, you're dealing with gods that have human traits. So you've got somebody who likes running. Well, they're probably pledged to Hermes. You've got somebody who cares for their home. They're probably with Demeter. That's the Roman name. What's the Greek name for Demeter? Goddess of the hearth.
No, goddess of the hearth is Hestia.
Hestia, that's it.
But Demeter is the goddess of grain and Greek and harvest.
Okay,
Grain
good.
and harvest. She's
Yeah.
Stephanie's mother.
Cool. Were you going to say more?
Yeah.
I thought I heard you say something. Yeah.
I said Demeter is her Greek name, not her Roman.
Okay, thank
It
you.
might be both.
I am not a specialist in. I know certain things about
I'm
Greek
not-
myths, but I don't go deep in. Mrs. Solzvik is our Greek myth specialist.
Yeah, I don't. I remember some this. I don't know if Demeter has a Roman name. She might have the same in both. I'm more familiar with the Greek names over the Roman names, but
Well, certainly Hestia becomes Vesta,
yeah,
and the Vestal virgins are going to be really important in Roman
Hestia, her
society.
name changes. I think that the Athena's name changes too, but I'm not fully.
I don't know if Athena's name changes.
I'm,
That's an interesting. Well, whoa, let me find out.
I'll
Yeah,
find
yeah,
out.
yeah,
I'll find
like
out.
Artemis.
Yeah.
Have you found Demeter's Roman name yet?
No.
Okay, it's Sirius.
Ceres.
Right.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And Ceres is also the name of the largest asteroid, which is cool.
Demeter's Roman name. I kept saying that.
Okay.
That's true. You're right. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. So, understand that with polytheism, what we're doing is we're projecting our human qualities into the divine world. Now, there's something comforting about the pantheonic gods of Greece, Rome, and the Norse and the Nordic peoples. And what's comforting is the gods are like us. We're like them. We can negotiate with them. This is something true in animism also. If you make a proper sacrifice, you can maybe buy off a god. If you say the right words, burn the right incense, slaughter the right animal, smear the blood in the right way, the god may be pleased with you, and you have just purchased divine favor. So, an advantage of polytheism and of animism to a lesser degree is that magic works. And magic is the application of will in ways that are not reasonable to achieve goals. The application of will beyond reason to achieve goals. That's one definition of magic. And polytheism and to a lesser degree, or actually to a different degree, animism are both magical. Yes?
I was going to say, if you look at the morals, it's quite interesting. Whereas monotheism is definitely more of a Kantian thing. Don't lie, don't cheat, always keep your promises. Polytheism is more of a moral particulars thing, stating that there are no set rules for each situation.
Right. And that's because the gods themselves are not really in charge. Even the Olympian gods are the descendants of the Titans, or the descendants, and there are these conflicts in heaven. So there is no single unitary authority for any of this. Even the Sibyl at Delphi, she was simply channeling Apollo. And Apollo was not omniscient or omnipotent. He was not always right. He was Apollo. He liked people, but he didn't know everything.
He was also kind of, in all reality, the Oracle of Delphi, Apollo and Dionysus got along fairly well. However, when it came to humans, Apollo was kind of cruel.
Well,
he was kind of cruel because there were definitely humans that he favored, but...
Well, no, if you like someone, you care enough to be cruel to them. If you don't like someone, you don't care enough to be specifically cruel, you might just accidentally stomp them. It's a creepy thing what I just said, but do you get the psychology of it? He cares enough to know enough to figure out what really upsets us, and then he does. In any event, that's polytheism. Whereas a lot of cultures that don't become civilized remain in a state of animism, Japan's a great exception to this. A lot of the early civilizations tend to be polytheistic. In fact, all of them are. Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Greeks, the Romans, the Norse, the Indians. I mean, Hinduism in its own way is quite polytheistic. Hinduism has qualities of a variety of these, and we'll get to that. So, polytheism, then there's dualism. Dualism is best typified by the Zoroastrians. You got not many gods, but two. A Lord of Light, Ahura Mazda, or Urmaz, the Wise Lord, and a Lord of Darkness, Ahriman, or Angra Mainyu, the Lord of Darkness, Chaos, and Evil. They each inhabit their own universe until at some point, one day, bing, there is a matter-antimatter explosion when they come into contact. And that explosion is our universe. We live in the midst of an explosion. In that sense, Zoroastrianism is similar to Big Bang physics, where we also live in the middle of a big explosion that's still expanding. In Persian dualism, who determines the fate of the universe? Who determines the fate of the universe? Miss?
People's choices.
Yeah. Our choices tip the balance towards good or evil, light or dark, Ahura Mazda or Ahriman. Yeah. So we have a role to play. Now, there's a solemnity in dualism that isn't there in much of polytheism, which is an aspect of what you were referencing, Ms. Smith. The idea that the universe is serious business. The playfulness of a lot of the Olympians, and even some of the Nordic gods. And the Nordic gods tend to be more somber. The Roman variants of the Greek gods are much more somber. But there's still an element of humanity, of soap opera. In Persian dualism, no. It's the universe is at stake. And either we're going to go into universal heaven or eternal hell. That's it. So there's a seriousness to it, a humorlessness to it, if you will. Finally, there's monotheism. And monotheism comes in the form of the Abrahamic religions. Prophet Abraham is a holy prophet to the Jewish people, the Christian people, and as Ibrahim to the Muslim people. He is the first monotheistic believer. Now, monotheism, you are definitely dealing with God as creator, God as judge, God as the source of life and of light, and there is accepting God or turning away from God. Unlike in Persian dualism, if you turn away from God, it's not like you have a chance to win the universe, but you can live in a defiance of God for a long time. Bad things happen to good people, and good things often happen to bad people, very bad people. And if you look for justice in this world, you're not going to always find it. You're not going to always see somebody like Hitler ending up putting a bullet in his brain. Sometimes they live a long life like Mao Zedong or Joseph Stalin, and they end up dying of natural causes, very old and very evil. So these various approaches to religion each tend to have different qualities. Any questions on any of them? Because you'll need to be able to identify them and have some notion about them. What is the point of religious faith? Religious faith does two functional things to every society, and most pre-industrial societies are cohered around religious ideas. In a moment. The first thing that religious faith does, remember, a culture is a group of people bound together by certain core beliefs. Religion reminds people of what those beliefs are. They keep people coherent. They keep people dedicated to the same ideas, and thus they foster social unity. So the first thing that religion does in society, still in a moment, is it fosters social unity by reminding people of what their core beliefs are. The second thing that religion does is it helps people deal with the big questions. Why do we die? Why do good things happen to bad folk? Why do bad things happen to good folk? What does it mean that I now have a child? What does it mean that I'm in love? What does it mean that this person who has the ability to make me joyous or horrified just by smiling at me or frowning at me? What does it mean that these dreams are happening? To explain the big questions. That's the second thing that religion does. So religion reminds people of their core beliefs, and it helps people deal with the essential existential ambiguities of life. It addresses the big questions.
So essentially what I was going to say, that religion is a way to bring order to an otherwise chaotic world and universe, because we can never truly understand any aspect of it without giving it a name, giving it a face, giving it some form of a form.
That's true. And by naming things, remember the power of words and names in many religions, especially Christianity and Judaism and Islam. If we, through our own efforts, try to understand the universe, we're only going to get so far. That's why science is used in two ways by modern people. There are some people who understand that science is a methodology and that science can give us provisional theoretical answers. There are some people for whom science is a faith. They accept things on faith. And this is where you get the sort of dogmatic doctrinaire environmentalists who say, no, you can't question man-made climate change. Of course you can. The whole point of science is to question assumptions. I have a new quote on my wall because I was exploring this question. I found this wonderful quote from the physicist Richard Feynman. I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. Science should never be about answers that can't be questioned. But religion helps cohere. Let me think. I think I'll leave the law until next time. So we're done. Thank you for your attention. You may talk quietly among yourselves until dismissal. And Remember that tomorrow, 3 p.m. is the last time I'm going to be accepting work. See ya.